I think we're actually good. Alright, wonderful. Hello everybody, welcome, welcome. I am back over on OBS today rather than StreamYards because I was futzing about with StreamYards during the week and it was not doing what I wanted it to do. Welcome, welcome everybody. So we do have the craft cam running, which is currently taken up by a cat. Cat. Hi. So this is now currently the cat view, because of course it is. That is the cat. He is silly and weird, and we love him dearly, but he's also a pain in the butt. And that's my backdrop view. See, so we're just gonna kind of, yeah. Cat, there's a tail right there. You don't care at all, do you? Hang on. This will be the craft cam view, and I can get it to do the thing. Right now you're getting a cat tail, because of course you're getting a cat tail. I mean, that's just how this goes, isn't it? Hello everybody, welcome, welcome. Yes, kitty. This is the kitty cat in question. This is Liam. He is a total snugglebug. He has turned from a shy big house stray, or house panther stray, into this total snugglebug with me and my roommate. So yeah, sorry for the clunky beginning there. That was turning on the craft cam and finding the angles were wrong. So yay! Joy! I will be basically bringing in the face cam. The thing is, the craft camera is actually over here. That way. So I'm gonna use it more to show like snippets rather than I want to show something specifically. Sure, smack the mic. If I want to show something specifically, I'm gonna do that rather than having it running all the time. Just because I tried to clamp the camera here, like on this, I can't call it a desk. It is a yarn tote, and it will not clamp. It won't stay because there's no good spot to clamp it onto. So you do what you gotta do. So unfortunately now it's clamped onto the arm of the couch, and that means that it can't quite reach to be up here without it being right in my face. So yeah, I'll be bouncing between the craft cam and this view, and we're gonna see how this goes. I've gone back to OBS because I know it better, because StreamYards just was not doing what I wanted it to do. So yeah, that is what we're doing today. Let me know how the music volume is, and we're gonna go from there. Just also closing extraneous tabs so that I, don't have all the things. But hi, welcome in everybody. Welcome to the absurdity as usual that is the usual live streams. So today we are working on apparently way too many tangles. Here we go. Today we're working on these. These are a pair of gloves. I'm working on the thumb right now. I actually finished the thumb last night during the Toronto Knitters Guild meeting, only to realize that I had not done the decreases for the thumb. Because the way this works is because the stitch pattern is done in multiples of 4. You pick up 4 stitches at the gap point between the thumb and the body, and you then decrease those stitches down so that the thumb isn't ginormous. I did not decrease the stitches, so I had 4 extra stitches in my thumb, which gave it about an extra, I think that's, I don't know, let me check the tension on the pattern, but it was enough that I noticed. I'm like, this seems too big. Because the tension on my pattern is 26 stitches divided by 4, that's a little over 4 stitches an inch. So yeah, that would give me about an inch extra material. And I'm like, this thumb is too big. So I had to go back and undo that, which is what I was doing. That's what I'm up to right now. Like I said, welcome everybody. Welcome in. Good to have you all here. I can see the likes already on the live stream, so thank you to those who have liked the live stream. That is awesome. Thank you. And that is what we're doing today. Normally, I'm going to try being the operative word because it's ADHD brain time, to get these live streams posted like beforehand, so like, I can put links in like the Discord and the Facebook and all that. I actually was in a workshop until 20 minutes ago, so that's why none of that happened. I'm looking into getting like alerts and gubbins for the stream for new subscribers, for channel members when I eventually get channel members, for also to see if I can, in fact, recreate the channel points option, because that was fun. And it looks like it's going to work better with, I'll be using a third party, probably Streamlabs, if they can do it. For those who are new to the live stream, the purpose is to just hang out, chat, talk knitting. You can, if you have a question about one of my patterns, you can come in and ask. If you've got a question about knitting in general, you can come in and ask. And I'll also be just kind of it's a lot of stream of conscious babbling. Those who know my streams know how this works. I have transitioned over here from Twitch, so there's still a lot of learning that's going to be doing, and what you're seeing is still a pretty bare bones setup. I'm going to be adding to it over the next while. And yeah. Like, for example, I'm going to switch just for a moment, just to show you. This is old. The commands don't work anymore, because this is the old Twitch starting stream. So yeah, like, I have to redo all those, I have to do all this other stuff. it's going to be interesting. Yeah. So like I said, I have the craft cam. I'll switch this view for a second as well. This is going to be where I'm going to demonstrate stuffs. Like I said, the reason I'm not doing that consistently is because I can't make that work, give the confines of the space. So basically, if I wanted it, I have to be turned like this, kind of over here, so obvious, and that means my head is now out of this camera, and it just doesn't work so well. But yes, no, we have a kitty. We had a kitty cat. He was howling at the door to be let in. I let him in, and he decided that, nope, enough of this, I'm gonna leave now. He stuck his tail into the camera for a while. The joys of streaming with cats. First off, anything you own that is white, we have 2 black cats, will no longer be white. It will be gray. It doesn't matter how well you wash it, how well you delint it, it's gonna be gray. I'm gonna do a little bit of a clipping here because I've got a tag end. The thing is with this yarn, it's the way this yarn works is because there's so many multiple ends, it really doesn't hurt too much if you do that. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But hey. So right now I'm doing the ribbing of the yarn on the smaller needles. These are, I think these are 2.5s. 2.5 millimeters, that's the US 2 if I have my brain on correctly. I don't always know my US sizes, I'm sorry. The main body of the mitten, this textured stitch, is in a 2.75, which is, I wrote this down. So US 2 is a 2.75, so the 2.5s that I'm working on now are probably the US 1.5s. I don't remember all my US conversions, I'm sorry. Canada's in this weird land where we do some things informally in Imperial and many things in metric, and it is confusing. So I have to do this for not that long. I think it's less than an inch of this 1x1 ribbing to form the thumb. How long is it? Let's find out. What does the pattern say? The pattern says 0.75 inches. Now here's another sort of interesting quirk that I've learned. If you can get away with it, and you can't always because sometimes flexibility of a tailor's tape, but if you can get away with it, use a measuring tape. Why? Because tailor's tape, like sewing measuring tapes, like the I don't know what do you want to call them, they stretch over time. So your measurements will be inaccurate. These, the hardware tapes, do not stretch. So if you're just measuring something flat, use one of these. I kid you not. Okay, so yeah, I only went around. This is already 0.75. So I can just, yep. So if you're measuring something that's flat, and it's gonna and it can be measured, lay flat, do it with a hardware tape. I don't know what you want to call it, standard like hardware measuring tape, because it doesn't stretch. Whereas sewing tapes and that kind of thing, a lot of them will stretch just over time in use, meaning your measurements are no longer accurate. And we are dealing with something where sometimes it doesn't matter as much, but sometimes a quarter of an inch can make a huge difference. So Bahorn is saying, I should find my stuff and try knitting again. I remember you liking circular needles instead of straight. Yes. So straight needles are fine if you happen to own them. There's nothing wrong with them. But the advantage of circular needles is they are multi-purpose, because circular needles can do both straight and circular knitting. And some people just prefer them as well. Hello, Callus! How are you doing? It has been a while! So yeah, that is absolutely, like if you own circular needles, you can knit straight on them. And circular needles, if you're just starting out, if you're not sure what you want to buy, if you're just beginning, they're a great investment because they're more multi-purpose than straight needles. And the techniques are exactly the same. So yes, hello everybody. Like I said, it's good to be back. It's very, very nice to be back here streaming again. So I was working on this today. We're on this is the thumb of a fingerless method. I'll put this on to show you. This is a commission piece. So now we're going to do our bind off, and I'm actually going to show you this. We're going to switch cameras for this. So this is the bind off that we're doing. And yes, I'm away from the face cam because, you know, easier. The way this bind off works, I'm only going to do a couple stitches like this. So is one, so that you have your 2 stitches, and you knit 2 together through the back loop. Book. Then you knit your next stitch, also through the back loop. The entire thing is worked through the back loop because it gives it a little bit more yarn, and thus makes it a little bit more flexible. Then you knit through those together through the back loop. So you knit your next stitch, knit 2 together through the back loop, knit the next stitch through the back loop, knit 2 together, knit the next stitch through the back loop. You're starting to see the pattern here. That's pretty easy. And this is the I've heard it called the back loop bind off. I've heard it called a couple things. It's basically a very stretchy bind off, and it's great for things that need to be stretchy, which the tip of anything, like the top of a hand or the thumb, has to be. So yes. Now there is, if you want to get really fancy, a way to do this in the ribbing pattern. You can do it with purls through the back loop. I'm not doing that this time because it doesn't need to be that fancy. Oh, come on. Don't be stubborn. And yes, those who know me know I talk to the yarn. This is just, it's a pretty easy bind off. And you just work all the way along. This is why I set up the craft cam so I can do this. I wish I could angle things. that I could have the face cam running at the same time, or that I could actually see chat while I'm doing this. So again, I do apologize if you're trying to get my attention right now, because I cannot look at this and do chat, which is a curse of the space, and I'm gonna have to figure this out. There's 1 needle's worth of binding off complete. There we go, success. Alright, so this is a magic leap technique, so what we're going to do is we're going to just pull our needle cord till these other stitches are back on the needle, whee, and keep going. So I have to find out what's going on with the captions, because I'm supposed to have auto captions enabled, but they're not showing. So I'm going to have to see how that works. Like I said, I've got an entirely new thing to play with in terms of how do I do all the things on YouTube. So I'm starting out with the live streams once a week, and I'll see about upping them if the schedule allows, etc., etc. And yeah, right now, like I said, this is the, I don't know what you call it. I've heard of this called, like, the knit together bind off. I've heard it called a bunch of things. I don't actually know. I just usually hear it referred to as a stretchy bind off. And that's a good enough title for me. Last one. Then you just pull your ends through. This is from the previous attempt at doing the thumb, so it's, gonna be unraveled. I'm not gonna do my sewing in right now. Well, I suppose I could. Alright, so yeah, now I almost finished, it needs its ends. Now, I put the other needle somewhere. Where did I put it? Oh, ADHD brain. Oh, there it is. It's in the yarn bowl, where it would normally go. That makes sense. So there's 2 needles for this pattern. There is this one, which is a smaller, okay. I can actually tell the difference between them if I look. This is the smaller needle. The problem is, these do not have the needle sizes on them, but I can usually tell them apart. So this is the larger needle. This is a 0.75, 2.75. This is a 0.25, and so it's US 2. Whoopsies, and US 1.5. So yeah, let me show this properly. So this is the 2.5s, and this is the 2.75s, and I can't tell the difference. Oh, and my bitrate has just collapsed. Not sure what happened there. I just had both Firefox and the music player freeze on me, so sorry about that. And then this pattern does use 2 different sizes, and the reason is, I'll show you on this, it helps keep, see how, I've got it upside down now, this is the ribbed cuff. See how this is flaring a little? Oh wait, but everything else is running, so I'll just wait for the music to come back. Apparently it's going to do this for a while. We're good. The thing with this is why I do the needle switch. So if you can see, in front of the face here we go, this is flaring. This is knit on smaller needles, and it's still flaring. And the reason is because this textured stitch pulls the stitches in a lot more. It is a much more, it's much more tighter stitch, with a difference, I think the difference is a stitch per inch on it. And that means that by going down a needle size, this flares less. I could go down 2 needle sizes if I really wanted to. And that may be an option if you're working this pattern and you're like, I don't know what to make of it. I don't like how that flares out. So I think I am going to do the sewing in of all the ends. Why not? Let's just get this done. Now, when I say sewing in of all the ends, I mean a lot of ends. Let me show you what I mean. So there's a challenge with this yarn. The challenge with this yarn is this. So let me grab one of the balls and I'll show you. This is the original yarn. It is, as you can probably tell, incredibly fine. This is cobweb weight. This is thinner than most lace weights I've worked with. The reason is this is reclaimed. This is reclaimed yarn from an old sweater. There's a seller on Etsy, link in the description. I really like the yarns. And she reclaims these yarns from old sweaters and keeps them in a landfill and then sells them. So this is 100% cashmere for comparatively very cheap because it's recycled. Yay! Great! The problem is it's very, very fragile. Yeah. So first off, it has snapped while I'm working. And secondly, I worked the sock. I worked this with the yarn held quadruple to get the weight and the texture and everything that I wanted. Okay, but that means that as an individual strand snapped, you've got all these ends inside. Now, not all of them have to be woven in, because if one end works free, the remaining 3 strands are going to hold the stitch in place just fine. It's not the usual problem you would have if, like, let's say a strand of yarn broke free in a project, because then your strand of yarn is broken through, your stitch is going to unravel. Here, if one of the 4 strands slips out, the other 3 will hold it in place. And this yarn is also kind of fuzzy, so it's going to help hold the ends in place. But there's still some things I need to weave in. So yeah, there we go. So that's what the inside looks like, with all of these little ends and other gubbins that are just stuck. Now most of these I don't have to weave in. Like I said, I can just clip them and let them be. which is exactly what we're going to do. But for some of the other ones, I do have to actually do the things with it. This is also going to be very different when I wash it as well. So, yep. Once I get this wet, in any way, when I wash it, it's going to expand a little bit, just because of the way the yarn's going to be treated, and also all these ends are just going to stick together. The person this is commissioned for has very explicit instructions. This is a dry clean only or very, very gentle hand wash, because it's going to felt very easily. The first thing I have to weave in is the ends at the top of things, like where I bound off, because you have an uneven edge. So, see how what you have this end, see that little kind of nub right where my finger is? That's because, of course, I finished a row, and this isn't in a spiral, so you can see the row below. And that's easily fixable just by stitching it into place. Like, that's an easy one, but that's one of the ends that has to be woven in, because it's going to even out that jog where we started a new row. So in this case, I can actually use all 4 strands at once in my weaving, because it just makes things easier. I can just feed all 4 strands through the big needle and call it done. So all that's going to do is it's just going to even out and hide the end of that row join. The end of that spiral. That's all it is. Because remember, when you are working in the round, you are working in a spiral. Unless you're doing crochet where you've specifically done a turning, like a joining round. But in knitting, you are working in a spiral. So that means when you finish, you're always going to be 1 row above where you started. And there's a number of ways to hide that, but this is one of them. And it's just an easy trick of just sewing in your ends. But no, you're absolutely right. Basically, the second I get this wet, all these ends are going to stick themselves. Which is why I'm not worried about it, because I do want to wash it before it goes out. Everything I commission does get washed before it goes out, because that's just, just because. So all of these ends, I can just clip pretty close to the work. And then if I discover something is working free, I can weave it in properly later. Because basically, all I want with the ends of this is so they don't catch on someone's fingernails. I'm leaving a tiny bit of a tail, where I'm clipping these. Just so that if it does shift during the washing process, I won't end up with weirdness. But otherwise, it's going to be just fine. So yeah, that is the projects for today. So when I finish this, I'll start on the second glove. I have another commission on the go, and it's been on the go for a while, because finding zippers is harder than you think it is. There's an error? Why is there an error? YouTube just gave me an error. Why is there? You might be getting some buffering. YouTube's throwing up an error at me. Not sure. We'll figure this one out as we go. So anyway, that is why the other commission I'm working on is so delayed, because it's been very difficult to find zippers in the right color and style for the project. And that's just due to the supply line problem still. I did not expect that going in, but that's the thing. So again, I do apologize if you get some stuttering. Looks like it's YouTube, but like I said, still learning here. Like I said, with this, and the other thing is, if one of these ends does work its way free, I can tell the customer to just simply clip them off very carefully, because again, they don't threaten the structural integrity of the glove, because this is knit with 4 strands held together. Do I recommend doing that? Honestly, no. Is it what I ended up doing? Yes. Why? Well, because I spoke to my customer, and they love the idea of recycled cashmere. With 2-fingered mittens. You mean like the ones where it's the thumb and then finger and then the rest of them are a mitten? Because I've seen a couple patterns for those. I was gonna say. So yeah, because of that, my customer, I loved the idea of recycled cashmere, and that was great. And it could be cheap cashmere because, of course, it was reclaimed. Yay, even better. It'll be warm, it'll be comfortable. This is all well and great. But when I got the yarn, I knew it was thin. My initial idea was to double it. I knew it was going to be held double. I didn't realize just how thin. So I ended up holding it quadruple, because it needs the extra stability. This is very, very fine. I would be amazed if someone actually works with this on its own as a single ply. I mean, you could, but I would be surprised, because it does snap so easily. That could also be me, though. That could be user error, because I do knit tug on my yarn a lot sometimes. So that could just be me, not being used to this style of yarn, because it's very similar to what we used in some of the Shetland knitting and that kind of thing. And it just being that fragile and that thin. So this could just be my knitting technique not lining up with this particular type of yarn. That's the thing that can happen too. So for most of these, I can just go in and kind of clip this relatively close. Like I said, if it works out, because there's 4 strands here, not quite what I was thinking, but okay. I have not seen those. I've seen the ones that are thumb, index, and then the rest are a mitten, but I have not seen one that splits that way. Interesting. So Kat was saying there's a mitten design that splits at thumb, and then it splits like the Vulcan salute. And I have not seen a mitten design that does that, which is cool. I've seen one that does the trigger finger, where it leaves the index finger free, for example, for if you were going hunting. But I've not seen a mitten that does that. So, and yeah, no, interesting. I probably could design one. Vulcan mittens, yeah, exactly. I probably could design one. It's a really interesting idea. Like I said, we're just right now just trimming off all the extra bits, pieces, and fluff. And then it might need another trim when I wash it, just because the yarn will shift position. And what I'm hoping is all the ends lock in place, because they should. But if by off chance one shifts to the front and gets annoying, I can clip it off that way too. And I'm probably going to miss some of these ends, so that's okay. So yeah, like I said, my other commission is delayed because I'm just finding zippers is harder than I thought it would be. The one shop that used to sell that kind of notions and stuff doesn't exist anymore here. There used to be a shop dedicated, so like I said, the one shop near me that used to sell a whole bunch of like beads and zippers and stuff didn't survive the pandemic last I saw. And my local big box stores, neither of them carry zippers, which was surprising. And so I've been looking at like ordering, but a lot of them, they are ordering in bulk, so you have to order like 50 zippers from like a wholesaler, and I'm like, I don't need 50 zippers, I need one. So, well, I need two, technically. And so just finding zippers, and then the few I've found, they're not the right lengths, they're not the right styles. So it's proving to be more challenging than I thought it would be. I don't know how sewers do this. I'm probably missing something obvious, honestly. It's probably someone will say, go to this store, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, that makes perfect sense, why didn't I think of it? That's what happened last time. That makes sense, because of course, the question of just how exactly to divide for the fingers would be the trick. The rest of it's your standard mitten body, like the standard mitten body, that would not be a problem at all. It's just getting the fingers to divide properly and figuring out how to decrease the top would be where the math is involved in that. Alright, so yeah. But no, it's an interesting idea. I love the idea. So this is basically just, like I said, so now we've got these, it's still a little fuzzy on the inside, but nothing that should hopefully snag on fingernails. And then I'll do this again once I give these a water. Not even, I can't even let it wash, because these will felt if I wash them traditionally in a washing machine. They will felt. So it's going to be a very, very gentle hand wash for these. Because, yeah. And, yeah, that's one thing I already went over with my customer. I said, with this yarn, it's going to be dry clean only, or a very, very gentle wash. Next up, we're gonna do the top of the thumb. And we're also going to stitch, there's a couple stitches in this gap that are very much stretched to try and accommodate like just the gap. So we're going to do a little bit of stitching up in there just to kind of seal up the little gap. This happens with a lot of mitten designs. You'll get a small gap between the thumb. Any mitten that uses a gusset design, you'll often get a small gap in here. It just happens. There are ways around it in the knitting process, but you can also just stitch it up at the end with a little bit of extra yarn, which is what I usually prefer to do. It really is sort of a whichever one you prefer. So again, what I'm doing is first off, let me see if I can show you this. If you can see how there's an evenness, this is the top of the last round where I bound off, and this is the first actual round of the thumb. But we need to even those out, so we're just going to stitch into it to make it even, or as it's not absolutely 100% even, it can't be, but it is close enough for all purposes. There's a lot of finishing that is close enough, and it is the line and the question between how much finishing is close enough and how much do you actually care about that really, I think, distinguishes knitters, because there are some knitters who, I'm actually a fan of finishing things myself. I don't like the sewing up and ends and all that stuff. I don't want the ends, but the sewing up and just all that ending kind of work, I'm not a fan of it, I'm going to say. So I tend to decide generally that it is close enough, but that is something where you have to be aware that it is those details in finishing that also make something look professional versus kind of the bad implications of handmade. Finishing can take a garment from sloppy to good. And, you know, it's finding that boundary between how much do you care, how much effort do you want to put in it, and how does it look. Yes, somewhat, actually. It's a different style of gusset. The question is the gusset used in mittens similar to that in socks? Ish is the answer. Ish. Let me switch this, so I can give you a better look at this close-up. Okay. Book. So in this case, there's increases. In this particular pattern, the increases actually run right up the center of the thumb here, but because that keeps them in pattern. But usually, they would run, you'd have an increase that runs here and here. So the increases are in a different place from a sock gusset, but it is the same basic principle. Now, depending on your style of sock, they could be decreases instead. For example, if you're doing a cuff down sock, you'll actually be doing decreases instead of increases, because you first pick up more, you pick up extra stitches when you work the heel, and then you decrease them. In this case, like I said, you start here and you increase stitches like this way, and then you just put these on an extra like needle or scrap yarn and pick them back up again when you want the thumb. So it is similar. I hope that makes sense. It is similar in that they're worked with increases or decreases, but it is a slightly different placement of those stitches. That is how, that makes the difference in how the sock gusset versus thumb gusset. I mean, the sock gusset is actually symmetrical. Like, a thumb gusset is only on one side of the sock. You don't have two thumbs. Whereas a sock gusset, you have increases on the other side as well, to even, or decreases, again, depending, to line it up. The traditional sock gusset on a heel flap sock, you pick up stitches on the side of the heel and then decrease them together because you're working that way. I hope this makes sense. I do not have a sock pattern in hand to show you. It's in the bag. So, okay, actually, yes I do. Yes I do. Okay, hang on. Oh, these are fuzzy as heck. The cat's been sleeping on them. He has tracked little bits of cardboard from the scratching post onto the socks, so I do apologize for the state of these. But let's see if this shows you. So this is a sock, and this part is the gusset, this here. So the way it works is this part is knit flat. Hang on, there's fluff. So this chunk here is knit flat, back and forth, to make a flap that comes down from the heel. And these stitches are left just on the needle or on a scrap yarn. And then what you do is when you finish, you pick up stitches here, and then you decrease them. You can see the decrease line here, which is what forms the gusset. This is for a cuff down sock, so we're knitting this way. If you were knitting this way, you would increase your stitches, starting about here. You can, again, wear this about here. And you would increase your stitches, and then you'd form your heel. And you'd decrease your stitches at the top of the heel. Or work them in a pattern another way. There's different ways of doing it. But that is, so, yes, it is similar construction that it's the same, you can basically use the same types of increases and decreases, but they go in different places to form different shapes. I hope that makes a little more sense, because I do have a sock pattern to show you. Aha! And like I said, the cat delights in taking the little bits of cardboard from the scratching post and tracking them everywhere, and they stick to knitting. So I do apologize for all the bits that are stuck to the knitting right now. So basically, this is, like I said, I'm just finishing this off. This is the cuff. This is my cast-on edge for these gloves. I'm talking about socks now. This is a sock. No, it's a glove. It's a mitt. So this is the cast-on edge. So it doesn't have quite the same issue of that spiraling difference that we saw with the bind-off. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to flip, go to the wrong side, just flip. I don't even have to turn the whole thing inside out. I can just flip it to the wrong side ribbing. For ribbing. Actually, let me switch back to the craft cam so you folks can see this. Again, let's do close-ups because I can. Well, because why not? So this is the wrong side. What's facing me now? I just flipped the cuff up a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go underneath the ribbing stitches. The knit, it's technically a knit stitch. I just go underneath one or both strands of the V of the knitting stitches, just to secure my yarn a little bit. This is not superbly necessary. The only advantage of this is you want to bring it up away from your edge, so that when you do cut it, you don't have, because you're always going to have a tiny, you'll probably end up with a tiny little tail, like, no matter how well you try. And so what you can do is that means that when you cut it, it's now up near here, so that whatever tiny little tail you have isn't going to dangle down and cause problems for someone. And got little yarn bits all over the place attached to the scissors. There we go. And that is one glove done. Like I said, I'm lucky in that my customer is a similar size to me, so I can try this on to make sure it mostly fits. It is a tiny bit big on me, which is good because that's the sizing my customers asked for. So yeah, that is. You can see the thumb in particular is just that little bit big. So we finished this, which is perfect timing because I'm going to have to log off the stream. This is still very much a work in progress. I've switched over to YouTube. I've switched away from a lot of the software I was using previously. YouTube has made huge improvements in its live streaming structure, which makes me very, very happy. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you're watching on the replay, I will have chapter marks set up for this. It's a slow process, but I do it. And I hope you're all enjoying the absurdity that is me fumbling my way through how to work OBS and YouTube. Yes, it has been a long time. I'm glad to be back streaming. And like I said, I will usually most of the time be streaming whatever an hour ago is in your time zone. So, alright, thank you everybody. It has been an absolute blast. I'm glad to be back streaming. Alright, that is the everything. Thank you everybody, and I'm gonna log this out and call it a day.